Good morning and welcome to our webinar this morning, Navigating Cost and Labour Challenges, brought to you today by WRAP, Sysco, Speciality Group, the Frozen Food Federation and Breaks. We've come together to hopefully share some great tips and insights and ideas with you this morning to help check your menus working as efficiently and profitably as possible, help you minimise your food waste, which could be affecting your profits, share some tips on some fantastic versatile products that you can use across your menu, and ultimately also get the best from your freezer. Today was a pre-recorded session. We'll be playing the video shortly for you to be able to watch. So do sit back and enjoy it. And if you've got any questions as the webinar progresses, please feel free to ask them via the Q&A function on your Zoom menu at the bottom, and we'll answer them as we go. Thank you very much. So just to introduce our speakers today, we're joined by Paul Hullier, Head of Customer Marketing for Hospitality at Breaks, Andy Twells, Business Change and Collaboration Consultant at WRAP, Richard Harrow, Chief Executive at British Frozen Food Federation, Richard Wells, Development Chef for Hospitality at Breaks, Ian Nottage, Head of Food Development for Sysco Speciality Group, and Danny Silcock, Development Chef, Care and Health for Breaks. So we'll play the video now. Do ask your questions as we go. We'll answer them all at the end in the live Q&A, and look out for the fantastic resources that we have to share with you at the end as well. Thank you. So if you're experiencing a budget or resource challenge at the moment in your kitchen, where can you start?
Here's a relatively simple 4-blocker grid I'm going to put up on the screen. Along the bottom, you've got the complexity of dishes on your menu, and at the left, the sales, so how much does each dish sell. And this is primarily a hospitality focused plan, but it can also apply across many parts of the catering industry as well. And this is about, firstly, understanding your issues. What issues do you have in your business, rather than just jumping to a solution. So this is looking at sales, it's looking at complexity, and also looking at margin. And that will be where you're making profit, where your labour costs are, and where your risks of wastage are. So look at your menu and decide by dish whether it's got high sales, medium sales, or low sales, and then look at each dish to understand its complexity, high, medium, or low. It's a quite simple way to look at it. Dishes that have got high sales with low complexity would sit in this box. Green, because they're positive for you to have on your menu. If you've got low sales and low complexity, they would sit in this box. And you need to make a decision of, even though they're low sales, do they add something to your offer, to your menu? So they could have menu balance, and they're there for a reason, but the low sales are balanced with the low complexity. Top right, high sales is a good reason to be on your menu, but high complexity, so they could be causing issues, problems in your business. So again, in these 2 ambers boxes, you're looking to see how you might either put a dish on that might improve the sales, or look at a dish and try and reduce the complexity. And then this box, low sales, high complexity, really, why is it on your menu? Because it is not adding any value whatsoever. And then you do an overlay of what the margin is for the dish. So for this, you need to have specs. You need to have them properly costed to know which each dish is giving you. So you might have a dish that sits here, but if it's got a high margin, it starts to become less amber and more green. Similarly, you might have one here that with a low margin, it starts to move from a green to an amber. So again, review, understand, how can you improve the margin on the dish. And then finally, when you're looking at all those dishes, are there any single products on your menu? They're only there just to go into one dish. Orphan products, we call them. So look at how you can have multi-use products. So just final couple of elements. A low selling dish will add risk to wastage. So if they're key to your offer, review the dish, reduce the complexity and or wastage. Got an example from when I was in the industry. We had a menu on, we had a fresh tuna dish on. That tuna came in a pack of 5, and when you opened that, you had 2 days to use the tuna. And we looked at the sales Monday to Thursday in a couple of the restaurants in the group I worked for. You had less than 5 sales in that period of time. So you knew you were either putting that tuna in the bin come Thursday or Wednesday evening, or you were selling out of date tuna. So we reviewed that dish and moved to a frozen product to keep the dish on, because at the weekend it sold really, really well. And then finally, with high selling dishes, they're great for your menu. They need to be there. Customers love it, but that complexity is going to add to your labor costs. And again, you need to review that to understand, how do I simplify those dishes? So back to you, Fran.
Yeah, so I guess food waste is a really important consideration, actually, isn't it? I mean, it's not just a case of looking at what's on your menu, but actually what could be costing you money if you have got waste. So just thinking about that, Andy, what impact could that really have on your profits? And you know, how could you go about having a look at that if it's something that you're concerned about?
Yeah, thanks, Fran. I think at WRAP we like to change the terminology from food waste to wasted food, because one of the actual, whilst I'm just sharing my deck with you here, one of the actual points that we like to sort of bring to everyone's attention is that 75% of all food that is wasted is actually usable. And I think that's what we target our campaign, which is called Guardians for Grubs, around. So hi everyone, my name is Andy Twells. I'm a business collaboration consultant with 34 years in the industry, in the hospitality industry, working for WRAP. WRAP is the Waste and Resource Action Programme, and I'm going to just take you through some of our tools and our theories that are all available online. So just as a quick overview, the environmental impact currently of food waste or wasted food. If food loss and the waste were a country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter after China and the United States. So, you know, one of the things we talk about is feeding people and not bins. So currently, the biggest issue we have in the UK is the 6.6 megatons of food waste that's generated in the household. By far the biggest contributors to food waste, but you can see also that the hospitality and food industry has 1.1 megatons to also justify as well. So around 3.2 billion pounds of food waste going in the bin in the UK. So when we take that back to the UK's hospitality and food services sector, we know that on average we're throwing away 1,100,000 tons of food each year. And we, as I said previously, if you think of it as wasted food rather than food waste, that's 75% of it is avoidable. And when you talk about the cost and the impact on your profits, you can look at the right-hand diagram there. It's not just about the food that you purchased. So in terms of that 3.2 billion pounds of food wasted, you know, 52% of it would be down to the food that you purchased. But there's also a large sector of labor there, because obviously if you're not wasting time making food just to go in the bin, then you get that labor time back to use more efficiently. It's the equivalent of 1.3 billion meals, or about 1 in 6 meals that are served that we're actually throwing in the bin as a hospitality industry. So the way that we sort of instruct and hope everybody would look at their food waste situation is to identify the main sources of that food waste. In the UK, we have a thing called the Food Waste Reduction Roadmap, and this is the best practice, is to look at, first of all, targeting, set a food waste reduction target as a UK operation. You know, measure it in a consistent way so that you can actually see what you've learned from that. And most importantly, take some action. Act to reduce your own food waste within your operation, but also looking at the supply chain and your consumers as well, because some of the food waste, as we'll talk about in a bit, comes from your customers, depending on what food offer you've got. And then a lot of the businesses, I'm sure nobody's missed with COP26 that happened last year, the ambition for the industry to move a little bit more towards net zero. And in WRAP, we do have a voluntary agreement called Portal 2030, which helps businesses move a little bit beyond food waste and look at the actual GHG emissions within their supply chain and the stress on the water that we have through supply chain as well. So how do you start? By targeting? Okay, well, on the actual Guardians of Grub website, we have a lovely cost savings calculator tool that allows you as a business to go in there and actually put in your weekly covers, and it throws out lots of information that gives you an idea of the kind of money and savings that you could make against your actual current turnover, and equally what CO2e emissions as well that you can actually make a saving on. So it starts to sort of get the juices flowing towards what you could do as an actual operation in terms of reducing your food waste. All of these are freely available. It follows the UK principles of target, measure and act. because if you don't measure something, you can't manage it, you know, so that's really important to go through those steps. It's called the Guardians of Grub because, as I said before, we want to make sure that every resource that we have in the country that we're using to its full potential. We have two offers that are available at the minute. One is a cost saving skills course, which is 15 minutes. It's very quick, and that's designed to just raise awareness. So going through the cost calculator, some insight into training of where you can actually make an impact in terms of saving your food, a reduction in food waste. And currently we also have a cohort called Becoming a Champion, which is a behavioural change course that's available. Links and everything will be shared to everybody after the webinar. And this is a 5-unit course that helps you as a business really look at your food waste and go through some auditing process during that training as well. It also throws out with our tracking sheets the carbon impact to help you on your net zero journey if you indeed have the ambition to move on to that as well. And fundamentally, going on these courses actually proves some very good environmental sort of you know, actions that you've taken within your business. So it works as an evidence of action. What's important when you talk about measuring food waste is not just looking at a bin at the back of the kitchen that's got a certain amount of food in it and that is the weight that you produce. What we do with the Guardians of Grub training is actually break our food waste down into 4 areas around spoilage, preparation waste, plate waste, and buffet waste, or other waste, depending on what type of operation you are. And the importance of that is that each area and sphere of waste has a different action against it. So for example, if spoilage waste is one of your biggest areas of waste, it could be that you've got some issues with your storage. It could be first in, first out is not being observed. You know, if your preparation waste is your biggest issue, it could be that training's the issue, that people are just taking too much off of the actual food in terms of preparation. But that's for each individual operation to find out as they go through the actual training. So we provide all the resources in terms of communicating with your teams. We provide all the tracking tools and the calculators for you to do this and get you start on the journey to actually reducing food waste within your operation. But as we all know, because I think one of the biggest issues we have with the sector is we all believe that food waste is inevitable within our job, and the unfortunate situation, some of it is inevitable. So the next bit is, what can you do if you have food surplus within your business? Well, we follow a system of hierarchy, which is prevention is always the first point of call. If we can prevent it in our business, that's where you make the biggest savings. You know, if you can't prevent it, there are many, many programs that you can redistribute food, and in some instances actually make money back when you sell that food on. And the third one in the hierarchy is then if you can't really sell it to people, well, let's actually put it into bio-based materials and animal feed. And if that's not available to you, depending on your local councils and the area in which you operate in, then you go further down the hierarchy, looking at recycling to anaerobic digestion. So at least there's a bit of offsetting there in terms of a circular economy. And obviously the last thing we want to be able to do is send it to landfill, because that is the big issue around the creation of the greenhouse gases. So that's hopefully just a great an overview of the tools that we've got available that can help you, working in partnership with Breaks to reduce your food waste and actually see a little bit more profit coming from your endeavours. So I'm going to hand back to you then, Fran. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. That was really, really helpful and insightful, and lots of great ideas and things to think about there. Just, I guess, thinking about it further, Richard, I know we've been talking about your freezer can be a huge help for you. I guess the flip side of that is it's one of the great ways that you can, I guess, mitigate having waste in the first place, sort of using your freezer really well. I wondered if you wanted to go into that at all.
Right. Well, thank you, Fran. Thank you for inviting me along today. As Fran said, my name is Richard Harrow. I'm the CEO of the British Frozen Food Federation. We're a trade body for the frozen food sector. We have a wide membership base with many members who supply the hospitality sector. And so I want to talk to you today about the many benefits of using frozen food. And both in terms of helping you to manage cost and complexity. Paul touched on earlier about the matrix of looking at your menus. But I also want to touch on the role that frozen food can play in helping you reduce your food waste, really to reinforce what you've just heard from Andy. So let's start. First of all, freezing has a really long history. There's actually evidence that it was used as long ago as 3000 BC, which is quite a long time when people would use natural freezing processes to preserve food. Freezing is really nature's pause button. We first saw industrial application was actually developed by a gentleman called Clarence Birdseye. You may recognize the name. And he did that in the 1920s when he first developed the concept of plate freezing. However, today we use many types of freezing applications, and many are actually designed especially for the food being frozen. And what that allows us to do in pretty well all cases is products are frozen at actually the peak of their freshness and their quality. Now, if you take things like vegetables and fruit, they're actually frozen straight after harvesting. Now, the most common product everyone talks about is peas, that the processed, the harvested and processed within 2 hours. But the reality is, we do that with all vegetables. All vegetables that are frozen are harvested and actually processed and frozen within hours, far faster than you'll actually get a fresh product delivered to you. And we've actually got evidence and research that's shown over many times, where research shows that frozen vegetables have higher vitamin C levels than fresh, because once a fresh product is harvested, the vitamin C starts to degrade. And that's especially true if you're actually talking about vegetables that are being bought out of season. So broccoli coming up from Spain will have a much lower vitamin content than something that's been processed and frozen. Another good example is fish. A lot of fish is actually caught at sea and actually processed at the point of capture, and then even with aquaculture, when fish are actually processed, they're actually processed and frozen within hours. Now, all of this locks in not only the nutrients, it locks in the freshness, and it locks in the quality, which is really important when you're actually looking for products for your menu. You absolutely want products of the best quality. It's not just though fruit and vegetables and base fish. We obviously offer a lot of prepared dishes. So the photograph on the top left-hand side here is a coated blanch bait using MSC fish. Obviously, that goes towards what Paul was talking about earlier, about reducing complexity in your menus, so that something actually comes in, is already fully prepared for you. All you need to do is add a garnish to it. And I think it's also fair to say, Paul highlighted the issue around tuna. Well, if the operation had been using IQF tuna steaks, they could have taken out what they needed at the time they needed it, and then kept the rest in the freezer for use later on. It's the same with breaded chicken. Frozen industry can provide products with high quality coating and flavors to add real value to menus. With more and more demands being placed on restaurants for all types of information, from allergen, calories, provenance, etc., frozen is ideally placed and in a clear, controlled way. I mean, the picture on the second down on the right-hand side is actually a fully prepared dish of a fish pie, absolutely ideal to add to a menu, and there you'll have all the information that you need regarding calories and allergens. Also, as an industry, we're forever looking at new categories. One good example of this is the massive growth that we've seen over the last few years of the number of frozen herbs that are now available. Now, frozen herbs are a fantastic option. The better quality than the many dried, because they retain the essential oils, but they have far less waste than fresh herbs. So you can actually use what you need when you need. And that's a great option. I think it's also fair to say that one of the things we see frozen being able to do is to allow you to offer a wide range of options, such as vegan, meat-free, or to cater those for a dietary intolerance. These categories are becoming ever more important. And there is clear evidence that within a group, the person that is following a certain type of diet will be the one choosing where to eat. And frozen can help you cater for this person without the added complexity or potential waste. Now, we have, as a federation, have run research previously that shows that using frozen versus fresh ingredients can actually provide over 20% saving within a restaurant operation. And in fact, if you actually use frozen ready-made options, which are actually getting much, much better in terms of their quality and presentation, the saving goes all the way up to 50%. And another great benefit of our products is in a time that we're seeing real pressure around labor, real pressure around skill shortages, frozen products quite often offer a great way of helping you manage both of these things far more effectively. Now, let me come on and follow on from what Andy was saying about the role that frozen can play in terms of food waste. As Andy highlighted, the hospitality sector accounts for 12% of the UK's food waste. Now, I think what we're starting to see, the narrative around food waste is beginning to move away from the impact on your bottom line to the impact on the environment. And this will become ever more important. Now, whilst your bottom line, it will always be important, and we can save you money here, consumers are becoming ever more attuned to environmental impacts. Recent research by CGA says that 72% of consumers now consider a restaurant's environmental credentials when choosing where to eat. It's also important we focus on things that will drive the whole country to net zero. Food waste has a much bigger impact on the environment than packaging. Important as it is that we reduce packaging, but it's even more important that we actually reduce food waste. And as you can see on the slide, this is a slide from the packaging industry that shows that food waste has a much bigger impact on packaging. Now, one would argue, well, of course, the packaging industry will say that, but in fact, WRAP's own information shows exactly the same thing. So frozen offers many opportunities to reduce waste. As Andy's slide showed, up to 41% of waste can come from spoilage or prep waste. Frozen provides great opportunities to reduce waste in both areas. Take frozen veg or fruit that comes IQF. You can use as much as you need, returning the rest to the freezer, and it does not spoil after only a few days. So my suggestion is choose frozen as the first option and not the option of last resort. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll now hand back to Fran.
Thank you so much, Richard. Wow, crikey, a lot to think about there, and I'd never even thought about some of those ways that I could use the freezer. So that's brilliant. Thank you. Turning to our chefs team then, are there any other kind of smart substitutions you could make to your menu?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm sort of going to follow on from where Paul left, really, which is on the menu analysis part of it. And I think first part is to look at the menu exactly as he's highlighted, and then make that kind of compromise between which dishes are absolutely necessary on the menu at the compromise of the labour you put into it. And I think, you know, it's got to start with reducing the core menu size. And I think what we're seeing now out in the industry is more and more operators are becoming day part. So they're doing breakfast into lunch, into dinner, with probably afternoon tea slotted in. So instead of having that on one huge menu, suggestion is you do that on menu cards. So you can take something like a lunch menu off, which is high labour on service because you're building sandwiches, but you're getting less sellout and less cash margin. Same with breakfast, is obviously taking that away so you get your higher spend, and actually all your labour can be focused on the important bit, which is the dinner. Then you've got times of the week, Monday through Thursday, maybe more spontaneous dining, less spend. And then as you get into Thursday and through the weekend, more, I suppose, destination dining, higher spend per head. So what we're looking at is doing pop-up cards where you're using components, as Rich says, frozen components and ingredients like chopped herbs, chopped chilies, chopped prepared vegetables that are low risk, low prep, that you can actually do sort of pop-ups and street food even. So you can increase your trading space. A pub in summertime that's got garden space We're seeing a lot in dark kitchens as well, where it's just going through Deliveroo, and we've seen that through COVID, where we're getting kind of authentic world through flavors coming through. And I think as customers have been more at home doing cooking kits and are experiencing kind of more specialist flavors, actually their food knowledge has increased. So they're expecting a more authentic experience, which you can again do through frozen fruit because you're extending through the seasons and stuff. Less prep, less wastage. We've done a lot of work on concept solutions. I know Danny's done a load as well in his sector, where we're actually putting together theme menus from pizza Italian through pasta to Mexican, Pan Asia and North Africa, using frozen grain mixes which have got flavor inclusions and particulates through them. So it's essentially a low skilled operator just assembling for quick and easy regen, which can then be sold as takeaway or fully dressed on the plate in a really nice environment. I think bring Danny here in actually, because he's got some good ideas that I know he's been working on recently. If he's there.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Like as Rich said, the sort of dark kitchen piece has sprung up with COVID. It's growing more and more. We're seeing a lot of contract caterers potentially now exploring the idea of it, with people now sort of agile working from home, etc. So there's lots of reasons why things are happening, if you like. But on the dark kitchen piece, certainly some work that I did during COVID was around obviously creating concepts, as Rich has mentioned, you know, not just your standard burger to hot dogs that you'd expect from a takeaway, but more world trend-led food, things like Lebanese, Morocco, Indo-Chinese, etc. And these again are low-skill operations in terms of, you know, they're not necessarily fully qualified chefs, but they want to create something that's authentic. So again, by using frozen particulates across the whole of the menu, so the dark kitchen will have lots of these concepts, lots of these world flavors, but ultimately they'll have 2 or 3 people manning that kitchen. They're expected to knock out 20, 30 dishes, etc. So by taking frozen components, as we've discussed, it gives that flexibility there about using them across multiple concepts ultimately. The other thing we speak about hospitality there an awful lot in terms of waste is not to forget the other areas as well, the likes of hospitals, care homes, contract caterers, etc. So sort of my view on this very much in the quieter times is how you can strip your menu back, maybe do a cook to order service. Historically in a B&I operation, you know, you've got 3 or 4 or 5 different choices on the hot counter there, serving a few hundred people at a time, not knowing who's going to have where it's coming from, and you've got lots of food sat there potentially that could end up in waste ultimately. So, you know, quieter times, could you offer more of a cook to order stir fry style station, maybe an omelette bar or a simple grill bar, so you're not hot holding all that food, which obviously potentially could end up being wasted, if you like. Rich, can I pass back to you to
Absolutely, I think it's leading on from that, and I've got here, learn where your dishes, your recipes make the best impact. So it'll be signature dishes. I've worked with a customer recently, and we did a scratch cooked fish cake recipe, smoked salmon fish cake, using a chilled ready-made mashed potato, a chilled ready cut smoked salmon, and then just chopping some herbs through that, panko crumbing them and making the fish cakes. The beauty of all those ingredients being chilled and not previously frozen, you can then freeze those down for regen. The cost of those fish cakes and having the added value of being homemade on the menu is they were half the cost of the frozen equivalent. So that brings in a sort of batch cooking. So you start to realize actually sensible investment of the labor and using the correct products and taking some prep out of it to create batch cooking dishes that you can then freeze down really does help on cost. And I know Danny does a lot of that in his sector of the batch cooking, don't you, Chef?
Yeah, so batch cooking, great example. You know, we speak about it in the industry. You know, we speak about it even at home. Simple things, you make batch of chili, batch of cottage pie, etc., and then obviously freeze it down. And back to the example about the sort of hot counter where you have potentially chili on there, if you like. So if you made a chili there, do you keep some of that back? Do you chill it down? You can potentially use that for a jacket potato offer in the evening, if you like. So just boxing clever with menu and menu choices. To Richie's point there about fish cakes, again, if you're making a chili is maybe start off with a bolognese style sauce, if you like, and then how you can adapt that and change that by adding different ingredients in there. So you're taking a base dish, and then from that you can create 4 or 5 different things from it. Another example I've written down here is just about utilising products up, and it's the education piece. I think one of the guys mentioned earlier on, education is key to all of this. As a chef working in the industry, it's about utilising products, not wasting the products, and the knowledge, the experience you can draw on. And a simple example I've written down here is just bread. You know, how much bread, you know, it's a core staple ingredient that we all use, but from bread, you've got some bread that's going stale. You can dry it out and make breadcrumbs that you could potentially breadcrumb, which is fish cakes, and it's made there. You can make a bread sauce, you can make a bread pudding, you can make bread and butter pudding, you can make summer pudding, all from a little bit of bread that's potentially going past its best. Just because it's going past its best doesn't mean that it's not going to be usable. So it's about utilising all those ingredients up within the kitchen, if you like.
Yep, definitely that. I think additional, we've spoke about frozen and food waste, and then you think predominantly, you know, chilled, that's volatile, you're going to get wastage there. But it's using ambient as well. Ambient mixes and bases have got the versatility Dan is talking about. You know, take a basic scone mix, for example. You can obviously put your own cheeses and flavours in there. We've got ambient pastry cases where very easy to do your homemade quiche, add territorial cheese to it, seasonal veg and everything else. All of those things from a huge range, and ambient dressings and inclusions, dried mushrooms, etc. Something with a massive shelf life on it and prepared still gives you that home cooked sort of range on your menus.
And I think it's back to sort of skill set, if you like. And it's one thing that we talk about COVID an awful lot. The last 18 months, 2 years, it has had an impact on the industry. It has had an impact on staff, on labour, etc. But like I say, to both Richard's point, actually, there's products out there that can help with all of those and ultimately help reduce the labour and time as well.
Yeah, and it's no compromise on quality. I think even doing simple things like bar snacks there that we're seeing at the sort of, you know, kind of craft ale kind of pubs where they're doing sausage rolls and Scotch eggs, etc. What you can do is buy in, say, a really decent pork pie where, you know, the labour's high, but a Scotch egg, we've got a chilled, runny, scented poached egg, using that with a raft of sausage, speciality flavoured sausages, and you've got a homemade Scotch egg on the go. And similarly with sausage rolls, you can buy a ready roll puff pastry, a really good sausage meat fill, or something taken from our sausage range. You've got consistent portion control and a really good product just from easy component parts and a bit of labour.
I think the other key thing for me as well is to, you know, certainly coming from a hospitality background myself as well, is don't be afraid to run out of something. You know, if you've got a decent menu offer and there's lots of choice on there, if you're selling out of something, actually for me, that means it's a good dish. It means that it's selling well. It means that the turnover's good. It doesn't mean that you're holding lots of stuff within the fridge. Like I say, if you've got something that's vegetarian on there and you've sold out of it, providing you've got something else vegetarian on the menu, it's not the end of the world. Yes, it's disappointing for the customer, but actually it shows that the dish is popular and the food turnover is really, really good there as well. Just ways of helping reducing that waste. The other thing I've sort of scribbled down as well is just you know, and granted, not in every situation, not in every catering operation, but is a pre-order system. So where possible, if you can get wind of what's going to sell, if people can pre-order ahead of time, that's obviously going to help reduce the risk of wastage as well.
Yeah. And I think sort of lastly for me is starting old school where any chef would start, is how to buy better and buy cheaper. So it's looking often if you can increase the volume you're buying. So you've got your best selling dishes, you place that, you know, you're turning it over. Generally bigger case sizes are cheaper. Also the classic switch and save from a vendor brand. So we've had a customer recently buys two styles of chips, which is often the case now, a chunky one for fish and chips, and then a sort of skinny skin on one for steaks and grills. So just switching from the leading vendor brand to a wholesaler brand has saved them, I think, about 20%. The other thing is often central plate meats, we know primal cuts, steaks has risen considerably recently. So I think we're looking for a lot of menu accreditation on that. So by switching from a premium British Red Tractor, Aberdeen Angus 28-day aged, which has got a hell of a lot of menu appeal, probably too much space to even take on the menu, just by going a South American equivalent that is still Aberdeen Angus and still 28-day aged, again, saves big money. And the other thing is on recipe dishes where you don't need that calibration of primal cut, taking chicken fillets in, just get uncalibrated chicken fillets, and then to chop those up and put in curries and sauces, obviously that's gonna make a big saving as well. And then we've seen our veg supplier recently, because another thing to do is switch to Cat 2, like if you like the misshaped vegetables, if you can get hold of them, is a much cheaper way if you're doing any volume and you've got the labor to prepare vegetables and fruit, obviously, and that can save a great deal of money. That's about it from me.
Thanks so much, Danny and Richard. So many fantastic thought starters there. So hi, Ian, if I can ask you, the whole area of buying prepped and non-prepped ingredients, would you recommend buying prepped ingredients?
Yeah, I think it very much depends on the sort of operation that you're running, the sort of staff constraints you've got, how much labour you've got in the kitchen. Price is always a factor. But I think a few sort of call outs if you're considering swapping from whole head to prep product is, first and foremost, is understand what you really need. If you've made the decision to go for a prep product, is there are lots of different variants within that. I mean, what I mean by that, I guess, is, you know, do you need a hand cut, hand finished products, or is a machine cut product going to work just as well for you? For example, you know, if you were going to be doing a vegetable garnish on a plate, something like a turned vegetable or a Parisienne or something like that, then that's going to need to be done by hand. If you're just looking to get sort of diced carrots and diced onions into a casserole or a bolognese or something, then probably machine cut's going to be fine. Other considerations to think about is, do you need a bespoke product? You know, do you actually really need a 5mm diced carrot if your supplier has a 6mm diced carrot, for example? So, you know, if you want a bespoke product, then you're going to have to commit to volume, whereas an off-the-shelf product, chances are that your supplier is going to have that in their sort of portfolio anyway. So that would invariably be a bit cheaper because there are more people taking it. And then, you know, what level of prep do you need? Do you need a fully prepped product? Do you need a peeled, diced, sliced, cut product that's ready to eat? Or actually, is it just a peeled that's taking the time in the kitchen and sanitizing? So, you know, I think the first thing for me is really understand what you really need in the kitchen. I guess another thing is people immediately look at a prep product versus a whole head product and say, oh, that's a lot more expensive. Well, it will be, but I think what you really need to do is look at your whole kitchen operation. And Paul made a really good point earlier on his piece about understanding the cost of a dish and how much labour it takes versus the reward. So, you know, when I say about understand the true cost, so look at the yield you get from, I don't know, a head of cauliflower versus 100% usable product that you buy in. So that's obviously the first thing. And look at the labour it takes for you to do that. And what generally happens, and a good piece of advice I give to people, is give the product, the whole head products, to the least skilled person in your kitchen, because invariably that's who's going to be doing it. Generally, it's a sort of job that would give to the KP or the commie, you know, peeling and chopping and slicing. So yeah, a head chef can probably peel and chop a bag of onions in 10 minutes, whereas maybe the commie or the KP may take 45. So if you're really going to do the maths and understand true cost, you need to get into the granular detail. So actually time someone, you know, give them a bag of onions, don't tell them what you're doing, just say, peel that for me, and just see how long it takes them. And that gives you a true reflective cost of the labour. Don't forget that you're going to generate a lot of waste, particularly with things like cauliflowers and onions and potatoes, where there's a lot of peel, there's a lot of trimmings. So you've got to pay for that to be taken away. And this is really getting into the granular detail. But actually, what is the cost of removing your rubbish? For one, that's, you know, you may not be charged. It might be the local council just takes it away as a norm. But you know, many businesses these days are getting charged on weight. So factor that in. Something else that people don't necessarily think about with veg prep, you generally generate a lot of water waste. So, you know, washing, you know, potentially sterilising, sanitising, in the case of things like salad leaves, for example. So really think about that. Actually, how much water am I putting in that sink and how many times am I filling it up? Because if you're on a water meter, that also has a cost. And it really is getting into that detail. But, you know, this is about truly understanding the cost of your menu. Very often we'll look at how much a steak costs or, you know, how much a piece of fish costs, but we tend to forget about things like produce and vegetables. So that's really something I would recommend as well. Other considerations really is how does your in-house compare to a prep product? So if you're buying a salad leaf is a really good example. So if you've agreed a specification on a mixed salad leaf, and many of us all use ready-to-eat salad leaf now. I think it's a sort of bit of a hangover from the supermarket. Not many places look at, I guess, sort of taking whole head and breaking it down and washing it. So, but how consistent is it? So, because you're not necessarily going to get the same guy, the same chef preparing the same product all the time. So with a prep product, you've agreed a specification, then you know it's going to be consistent. So how does that consistency of buying a prep product in compare to, you know, someone that might shred a salad leaf really finely, as opposed to one of your chefs that will just rip it up and, you know, do it quite coarse and chunky. Other considerations, if you're going to decide to go down that route, then agree the specification with your account manager, with your representative from the company, because your idea of a 20mm diced carrot may not be what you end up getting, because if you want a perfectly finished hand cut 20mm in your head, that might be what you're thinking. Whereas actually, if it's coming through a machine, you will get lots of fines and lots of pieces. So make sure you get samples, agree the specification in advance of what you're going to get. Look at the big picture stuff. How much prep do you really need? It's that thing of, yeah, you might think, well, if those of us that have worked in large scale banqueting and stuff, that invariably we always used to buy baton carrots because it was a real pain to do that in house. But we'd still be prepping up cauliflowers and broccoli and so on. So invariably, it works better when you do a whole switch all of the we're talking produce specifically, but this can be equally related to things like filleting fish or ready-made sauces. But if you just buy one or two lines in, then the chances are all that's going to really happen is that the chef gets an extra cigarette break because he's got a little bit less to do, or he slows down a bit because he knows he hasn't got to peel that sack of carrots and dice them. So generally, to make real savings, you very often need to commit to all of the produce going to prep, and then you could almost lose a few hours labour, so your chefs can start a bit later. Potentially, you might even be able to lose a body out of the kitchen or not replace the one that you're missing that's left. So yeah, just doing one or two lines invariably won't end up saving you money. That would be my advice, is just look at the whole big picture. So it's a very long answer to a short.
No, it's some incredible thoughts there, I think, Ian, and lots for people to go at, to have to think about what they can do and, perhaps take a bit of a step back if needed. So thanks so much. That was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and I think sort of to Andy's point a bit earlier as well about, and I love that phrase, the difference between food waste versus waste food.
Yeah.
So if you, again, with a lot of kitchens now, we don't do the old school stuff of making our own stocks and soups and sauces. We don't do it from scratch. So if you're doing, I guess, prepped carrots and prepped leeks and all of that sort of stuff, then historically we'd have an outlet for that waste, whether it went into the stock pot or whether we converted it into a soup. So, yeah. And I think that's the thing. If you're not utilizing the trimmings rather than the waste, obviously peelings effectively a waste, trimmings is still good to go. So potatoes are a great example, that they generally, if you're making potatoes or chips or whatever, you can generate an awful lot of waste from that, with trimming off potato. If you're making potato purees and mashes and thickening soups with it, then great, then you've got an outlet. But I think probably not a lot of places now do have that outlet.
Yeah, no, that's a really good consideration as well. Well, thanks so much, Ian. That was brilliant. So just to cover those great resources that we have for you to help you off the back of today's webinar, you can download these straight away using the QR code here if you've got your phone handy, or you can use the short link here too that we've provided on the left hand side. Some of the fantastic things that are included here for you to help are that brilliant menu mapping tool that Paul shared at the beginning that you can use to evaluate the strength of your menu. We've also got 3 brilliant one-page guides to smart product swaps that you can make, a sum up of the key themes that Andy talked about in the minimising wasted food section, and also using your freezer. Plus, we've included the slides from WRAP and the British Food Federation here that Richard and Andy presented, so that if you want to look at those again, you can. And also a couple of useful website links too. So the link to our More for Less webpage on break.co.uk, where you can find lots of ideas, and also the link to our previous minimising food waste webinar, which included WRAP actually, that you can go on if you want to explore more ideas for how to minimise food waste. And some of those fantastic concepts Andy talked about here are talked about again in that webinar, and there's also a lot of other ideas in there that you can tap into. And then just a bit of an overview actually of just some everyday great promotions that you can tap into at Breaks, and sort of making sure that you're getting the most out of those. So the Breaks promotion page on the website has monthly promotions on there, quite often steered around themes. You can find lots of great products ideas on offer. We've got our everyday low value page as well, which you can access using this link, but it also is available from the promotions page, and that's just a sum up of all of our kind of core products at everyday low prices. Our mega deals page, so these are deals that we have on a weekly basis. You can look there for some great prices on sort of everyday products, and also our daily reduce to clear page. So it's a great place to go for kind of a daily deal. So without further ado, we'll hand over to the Q&A. So if I can ask the first one, Richard, to you, if that's all right. How do we counter the image of frozen food with the public?
Fran, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think we're already starting to see that happen more and more. I mean, if you just look at the retail category, you can see now the breadth of products that are actually on the market. We're starting to see evidence that the millennials and Generation Z actually have a much more positive attitude around the role of frozen food within their diet. They are hung up or less hung up about, you know, the old perceived ideas that frozen food was basically, you know, soggy fish, you know, poor quality lasagna, chips and peas. And I think we are beginning to see that movement of people understanding the quality of frozen food. Have we finished yet? No, obviously we haven't. We must still continue to do that. And I think if we can link, you know, the role that frozen food can play in helping food wastage, that will help again around you know, the public's positive view of frozen food.
Thanks, Richard. Do frozen food products contain additives to extend their life? That's another one that's come in.
No, I mean, basically it's one of the things. I mean, as I said in my presentation, you know, freezing is actually nature's pause button. So quite often you will find, if you look at the ingredients list of you know, a chilled product versus a frozen product, you know, we're a much cleaner product. Now, obviously, if you're making it from scratch, you know, a chef will also make a very clean recipe. It's one of the advantages of frozen food that we can actually have very clean recipes. We don't need additives to extend the life.
That's great. And just, I suppose, on that theme as well, is there a difference between freezing products in your walk-in freezer versus products that have been frozen by the producer, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, when we freeze industrially, we really freeze quite quickly. You know, we will use all sorts of different systems, but the object of the exercise is to get the product frozen as quickly as possible. So the function of freezing, for those people who are not a sad individual like me, but when you freeze something, what basically happens is the water crystals in a product will expand as you freeze it. So the slower you freeze it, the more that will expand and the more that will actually break down the texture of a product. So the faster you can freeze it, the more chance you're going to keep the texture. And because we flash freeze product, you know, an industrially frozen product will have a better texture than something that's frozen in a walk-in freezer, for instance.
Oh, I mean, crikey, I hadn't even really realised that. Another question that's come in: should I cook frozen products in the same way as chilled or fresh?
Well, again, I mean, I'm sure, you know, Brake's development kitchen will spend a lot of time making certain that the cooking instructions they have on packs are actually geared to the products inside it. And quite often, you know, on a frozen product, you will have a slightly different cooking instruction. You know, we're seeing more and more over the last few years product being cooked from frozen, which is it's a great option. You don't have to defrost something to cook it, but you know, I would recommend that you follow the instructions that are on the packaging, because they've actually been designed to make certain that product comes out of the cooking process in the best possible condition.
Yeah. So I guess just thinking then about food waste, Andy, if I can turn to you, are there any ways that you can get kind of your team on board in the kitchen, I guess, with helping out to control the level of food going to waste? I guess you covered some of this in your presentation.
Yeah, no, I did, and we work in a people industry, so obviously having a really engaged team is you know, we can't do our jobs without the team behind us. So yeah, I mean, obviously training is always a you know, a good investment in terms of the team you know, feeling invested in, but equally sort of making food waste reduction targets and processes part of their KPIs and annual reports as well helps them to sort of drive the importance of it a little bit further up their priorities. But most importantly, it really is about, you know, visualizing the food waste. That's why we break the food waste down into 4 categories. And the idea being, and some of the training that we do with the RAPs becoming a champion, is that you look at those 3 separate categories. Each one of them has a different action. But most importantly, with the team, you then engage their ideas in terms of how they could actually counteract that waste stream, what they could do with it, for example, you know. And through that process of engagement with them, they also start to understand the value of what they have actually put in the bin that day as well, you know. So it's really important to do that. And one of the other things that we do particularly prolifically in food services in my career before I came to RAP was having calendarized activities every month, you know, that sort of focus around the team getting involved and communicating with the customer, standing front and center in front of the customer and being able to talk about what they're doing in terms of food waste reduction, you know, and putting, you know, and really being proud of what they're achieving and sharing that with the customers as well. So it really is about the people, you know, it doesn't work without, and that from the top down. There has to be a buy-in from senior management within any organization for it to work. And as the operations and regional managers walk into their various operations, their first question should be, how's your food waste? You know, because it's really that important. So once they realize it's on the agenda at a senior level, then it becomes much more of a buy-in from the actual the team on the ground as well. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, very much so. I was just wondering then, actually, thinking about sort of senior management, because I guess it's getting them to buy into it, and I just wondered if you had any tips for that, Andy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. We at RAP are quite happy to have a conversation at board level within any organisation. We have a product called C-Suite, which takes board level engagement step by step through a process of putting a food waste reduction program within their operation, writing standard operating procedures and policies for the company as well. We can help with that, and because obviously RAP is all about sort of providing a lot of statistics that at a senior level, quite impactful in terms of where, you know, we're positioning the company and where they want to be. So yeah, if somebody's having difficulty engaging their senior level management, then yeah, drop us a line, let us know, you know, who those contacts would be, and we'll happily talk them through, you know, some of the good reasons and benefits, as well as reasons for having a food waste reduction program, and furthermore looking, as I said before, into their supply chain and the impact they're having as a bigger business, you know, in terms of the environment. So yeah, we can help with that for sure.
Thanks, Andy. So then just thinking about sort of products themselves, if I can kind of turn to the chefs, this might be more of a question for you, Ian, but just wondering if there are any cost benefits to buying ingredients that are in season, for example, whether you've got any thoughts on that.
Yes, potentially. It depends very much on the sort of contract you've got set up with your supplier, because what we tend to do as sort of Fresh Direct Sysco group is we will very often, with the larger customers, we will negotiate 6-month pricing with our suppliers and with the customers. So that means you've got sort of clarity for the duration of your menu. It's not going to fluctuate up and down. I think in-season product can be cheaper if you're buying sort of off the market or spot buying, if you like, or you have a different account whereby, you know, it will go up and down throughout the year. But I think that really that comes with its own challenges in a way that you've got to constantly keep an eye and constantly check your prices on your menus and what's good and what's not. I think it works particularly well with things like fresh seasonal fish. Probably more so than produce, because when we fix a 6-month contract, we'll take into account, yeah, it's going to be UK seasonal. So generally you'll find that summer pricing tends to be cheaper than winter pricing because we're not importing so much. But yeah, it can depend on the sort of account you've got and the agreement you've got with your supplier.
Thanks, Ian. I guess kind of on another sort of vein, can adding sort of prehuman dishes to your menu kind of create opportunity for you as well? Just thinking, does that help sort of generate more margin for you, for example?
Absolutely. I think of all of the food trends that we see, and we see a lot, I think premiumisation has been the one that's really sort of stood out head and shoulders this sort of last 18 months. I think people have spent more time at home, they've spent more time cooking, they understand ingredients better than before. And as I say, they've watched a lot of TV, no doubt, and they're getting more into food, I think it's fair to say. So yeah, if you've got a backstory for a product, generally customers do love the provenance of a product, whether it be a Kentish blue cheese, whether it be a line caught, wild sea bass off of the south coast, or whether it be a strawberry from the heart of Kent. Menu provenance can drive menu value or perceived value. So if you're able to call out an ingredient, generally customers are happier to pay a little more for the story, as long as the product's good. Obviously, that fundamentally you can't get away with naming a product if it's no good in the first place. But generally, artisan type products will command a premium, and you can call it out on your menu and you can charge accordingly.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ian. So then I'm just thinking, going back to the beginning when we were talking about kind of reviewing your menu, what's working for you, what isn't, what's adding value, what isn't, level of complexity. How regularly do you reckon it's good to sort of do that exercise and review your menu? Is it something you sort of do monthly, quarterly, kind of when you have a menu refresh? Just thinking.
Did you want me to answer that one, or?
I'm happy to pick that one up.
Thanks, Paul.
So it is probably worth doing quite regularly, because sales will fluctuate, and managing your margins if you do have non-fixed price on products, that might. So I would do it regularly. I'd do it at least once a month, almost if you're in a good habit of doing monthly stock takes to understand where your risks and wastage are and where your volumes are. Put it into that kind of rhythm. It could be, you do your stock take, it might be your review is the following week, and that will then allow you to deal with any issues around the dish as soon as you've identified it, because if you wait 6 months, it's too late. And then you might plan to change that dish, and it could be moving from lots of prep to a less of a prep and it's been done by a supplier, or you're moving from fresh to frozen, or bringing in components, and you can deal with it without necessarily changing what's on your menu or the description on your menu, etc., etc. So you can manage it. So that would be my recommendation. Look at it at least monthly, and then when you're planning a full-on menu change, you've got lots of information and history to say, right, okay, well, I've managed that product or that dish. I now need to deal with it totally by possibly taking it off or changing its selling price, those types of things. So that'd be my recommendation.
Thanks so much, Paul. Thank you ever so much for your attendance today. We hope you found it useful. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.